Right now on Tech Radio, how was your year? The tech year was busy.
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week online and on air with RT Radio, we bring you the latest in tech from Ireland and across the world. This is episode 1049, this week in association with PwC, helping you unlock the full potential of AI and digital transformation. Later on, we'll be joined by Moira Cronin from PwC to discuss the year in regulation. But let's kick off this week looking at the stories which made 2024 so interesting.
From techcentral.ie, this is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Dusty. Joining me as always, our editor-in-chief, Niall Kitson. We're kind of breaking down the year 2024 between Irish stories and international stories. Now, you are all over all the local stories. So what do you want to lead out with?
Let me ask you this question before we jump into my first story of the year. Do you know how much an artist makes from a single stream on Spotify, Apple Music, and apparently musician-friendly Tidal?
I can sum it up in two words.
Yeah.
Sod all.
Okay. You're not wrong.
They don't, because it's the people on Spotify. It's the Elton Johns, it's the Ed Sheeran, it's the Taylor Swift. They're the people who are getting streamed billions of times, and they're the ones who are making some money. But if you're like a regular artist, if you're Picture This or Fontaine's DC or any of the popular Irish bands, you're making very little out of Spotify or Apple.
Very true. And I have the rates here in front of me to prove it. The current rate for Spotify is between 0.003 to 0.005 cents, that's US cents, per stream. Yeah.
Oh my God. So you're saying that it's 1/2 of 1 American cent every time their song is played?
If you're doing well. If you're popular. Do you have a current subscription price for Spotify?
It depends if you're on family or couples or whatever, but I think it's around €12 at the moment.
Yeah, you're bang on, $11.99 in euros if you want to subscribe to Spotify. Okay, for Apple, it's a little bit more sympathetic. It's 0.01 cents. And the subscription is $10.99. So you're getting an awful lot more bang for your buck with Apple Music. Unfortunately, there are fewer people using it, but there you go. And if you go for Tidal, where they've got a much smaller user base again, the rate is between 0.1 and 0.5 cents. With subscription rate of $10.99. And of course, Tidal has always prided itself on being sort of musician first and quality first, whereas, Spotify has generally done well on price. You have dropped a music service during the year, did you not?
I was on Spotify for a long time, and then at the start of the year, I moved over to YouTube Music. And then they increased their price by 40%. So I said goodbye. And now I have no service at all.
Aha. Very good. Very good. I'm on the free tier of Spotify, and it annoys me no end. It seems like I'm just getting into a band and then I'm hit with an ad. It's like, oh, thank you for that.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's the joy of getting it for free with the advertising. Do you know what? I would kind of agree with you in that I think the advertising on Spotify, now I haven't really used Spotify, but the advertising on YouTube is it's ridiculous in that maybe it's just kind of up until this point in time, we've had linear broadcast radio and linear broadcast television where it's kind of like, at an appropriate moment, okay, we know we're going to stop for commercials or whatever it happens to be, and commercials happen and then we move on, all right? And that's fine. But this YouTube business of halfway through a sentence, boom, it stops to play an ad.
Yeah.
It's interruptive advertising, and it's kind of like, I don't think it's good for the advertisers, because I find with all this interruptive advertising is that the first thing that the person feels that is watching your ad is annoyed.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if that was their pitch? Hey, come on, advertise on YouTube. We've got 16 billion, blah, 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 blah. And then every time somebody sees one of your videos, we will make sure they're annoyed.
Well, look at it. This is sort of a preamble to one of my stories of the year.
Okay.
Because we know musicians are being treated fairly badly by the streaming platforms. And we know that very, very few musicians these days can actually make a living off their art. Unless you're gigging twice a day, every day, you're not going to make a decent living. That's just the way of it at the moment. So IMRO came along, and they've actually had a pretty good year. They brought in nearly 46 million euro. I think that's an all-time high for the organisation. That's pretty good. And they actually signed a partnership with Audoo, Audoo. Have a look at them. And what this company does is it's basically a music recognition software, right? So it basically will scan everywhere and go, hang on, that's using a bit of your music, or that's a platform that is using this music when it shouldn't be. And it's all about helping collect royalties that are due. Because this is one of IMRO's services, is collecting and charging royalties as appropriate. And they're using a piece of interesting software to help make their lives a little bit easier in doing it. So I think this is a really good move. I think it's positive for artists. One scary thing, however, though, and again, this is a little bit of a side thing. Have you heard any AI generated music?
Oh, I have. And it's one part absolutely dreadful, and in another part absolutely insanely good. Because when you think that you can put in a prompt and you get a reasonable approximation of a song with the music and the lyrics and it being sung, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, get ready for short films being made that way, because there's a TV company called TCL. They're doing deals with Walmart, I think, at the moment in the States. So if this agreement takes off, get ready for AI generated content on your TV. Sort of entire stories, entire movies.
Well, it has to be better than half the human generated content on YouTube, but that's just me. Meow. International stories. I know that I put this atop of my list because I know it's probably your favourite international story of the year. And that's our friend, Sam Bankman-Fried, who just swindled God knows how many thousands of people out of a whole pile of money with the whole FTX scandal. And he got 25 years in jail and a special dance from Niall Kitson.
Oh, come on. I mean, 2 years ago, I said he would be the man of the year. I mean, in late 2023, this story was breaking. And I was like, this is going to be huge. This is going to be huge in 24. And indeed, the trial did start. And this year was really when we got some good soap opera stuff. With Caroline Ellison, his on again, off again girlfriend, who basically blew the case wide open. And he ended up getting, how long?
25 years.
25. Hey, as we've always said on this show, do not mess with the money.
No. But it was billions. It was billions that he was defrauding people out of, so that's ridiculous. And he deserves to go to prison for 25 years. On the plus side, though, I know kind of regulation and cryptocurrency doesn't kind of go together, but the more reliable, if you want to put it that way, that cryptocurrency is, the more likely that bigger players are going to get involved. And I think we have had that with the creation of electronic traded funds. This year, where you're getting in big pension funds and big investors and stuff like that, and they're putting money into crypto. And the fact that they're doing that is just strengthening the market. And that's why we're ending the year with Bitcoin at over 100,000 euro.
$107,000 at time of broadcast.
Yes, indeed.
Incredible.
We're in Europe, Niall. Never mind that strange dollar rubbish. We're over 100,000 euro, which is quite good. So I think the fact that Sam Bankman-Fried kind of went to jail and there was that huge scandal and people are asking questions and they want to see certain protections in place is possibly a good thing. for crypto overall. But as a person who loves the idea of crypto, I would not want to see it being regulated by the government either.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of neat that you've got all the fiat currencies. So you've got, your euro and your dollar and your sterling and whatever, and they're all run by governments. And there's a whole huge amount of trust. And let's face it, that's all that's behind those currencies is trust. There's nothing of value behind them. But I think it's nice to have like an independent global currency, if you like, that you can use. And I think Bitcoin is it.
Whose value is based on?
Nothing. That's the thing. No currency is built on anything of any value. All right. It's before we were even born. President Nixon was president in the States. And up until his time, the value of the dollar was inextricably linked to the value of gold. All right. So you knew that you could go and get some gold and there was a very hard value to it. And he went, nah, let's not bother with that anymore. That just complicates things. Let's just take away any value behind the dollar and just see what happens. But that's it. That's it. The history of money, you should look it up, is very, very interesting. Did you know how it came about?
No, go on.
Oh, you send me down a rabbit hole now. What are you doing this for? All right. So people used to trade gold and gold nuggets and gold coins and all that kind of stuff, all right, because that had real value. But the problem was when you were traveling from A to B was that somebody would come along like, Robin Hood or somebody like that, take all of your gold coins. So they kind of went, there's got to be a better way. So a fellow would go into a goldsmith and he'd say, mind this gold for me. And your man would go, yeah, sure, no problem. Here's a piece of paper. You go see my pal at point B and you give him that piece of paper and then he will give you gold to equal value. All right. And we will have the system between us looking after the actual gold. You just travel with a piece of paper. Yeah. So that's how it all started. And then it progressed and it progressed. And then the goldsmiths kind of figured they had all this gold, but they were able to write pieces of paper that had no actual gold behind it. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So they kind of went, right, not everybody's going to come in and cash their gold at the same time. So I can write a couple of extra bits of paper. And that's essentially where money came from.
Okay.
So
the more you know.
The more you know. And then Nixon, as I say, in the early 70s, whenever it was, he decided to, kind of kill that relationship between the dollar and gold. And now there is nothing behind a government issued currency, and there is nothing behind Bitcoin. It's like property might be a little bit different, but there was a couple of scandals over the years in Ireland and they were talking about the value of property and it's not worth that. And there was one developer and he summed it up perfectly, right? He said, a piece of property is worth what somebody is willing to pay for it on the day it's on sale.
Yeah.
That's what defines it. That's what defines it. This year it could be $1 million. Next year it could be $2 million. The year after it could be 200,000. Who knows? Anyway, this is the society we live in. Right. I think we should move away from FTX and get on to another Irish story quick.
Okay. I've ended up giving you a soapbox or something.
What have you done? What have you done?
Yeah.
Come on.
It's something else you're going to have a lot of.
Oh my God! Go on.
A lot of input on because we've got a couple of new state bodies this year. One of them is Comisiún na Man, formerly known as the BAI. Well, I mean, not so much formerly known as BAI. It's more than rebranding. I mean, they've had their remit expanded to look after online media as well. Yeah. So really, I mean, the BAI had it pretty sweet before they had to deal with any of this online stuff. So tell me, Dusty, as somebody that still works in, audio occasionally and broadcasting, has Comisiún na Man changed the way you will interact with public bodies as opposed to the BAI? I mean, the BAI was it primarily a funding body by the end?
The BAI was just literally looking after broadcasting. That's what it was. Now Comisiún na Man is looking after media. So it's taking in everything, including online, which is massive. And it's particularly massive here because Ireland is the headquarters for Facebook and and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I don't think, I haven't noticed any difference dealing in my dealings between the BAI and now that they're Comisiún na Man. Same. You're dealing with a government department And that comes with all the advantages and smiles that you would expect.
Okay, fair enough.
They might be listening.
It's probably hard, to be honest.
I miss the Media Commission, of course. They're gonna check out every podcast in the world. Go on.
So, Commission Demand, yep. Online plus broadcast media.
Yeah.
However, they did publish their online safety code this year, which is a huge step forward because it shows that they're engaging not just with what happens on Netflix, but what is actually happening on our social networks every day, which is great. That's a fantastic step forward. And just this week, they issued a statement saying they believed Facebook was exposed to terrorism.
Well, Kel Sprees.
If one was a terrorist, you can go on Facebook and Commission the man know all about you. So there you go. I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious. As far as I'm concerned, any attempt by the state to protect its citizens is a good thing. Any attempt to protect children is a really good thing. So thus far, Commission the man is it's on its honeymoon period, certainly with me, and we'll see what happens when it comes to enforcement. That'll be the proof.
Yes, we will see. The other big restructured state body that was making headlines this year was Research Ireland.
Yeah, Research Ireland, which is Science Foundation Ireland plus the Irish Research Council. Now, one might wonder why there were two bodies funding research in Ireland in the first place. Well, the Research Council was basically looking very broadly at sort of arts and humanities and basic research and things that don't necessarily make money. Whereas Science Foundation Ireland was set up by Mary Harney in the 90s, I think, with the express mission of turning research into viable companies. Right. So we will fund your research. We will help you get, industry partners. And at the end of it, you will have, a patent. You might have something sellable. You might decide to spin off and become a company. This was very much the plan. And it worked spectacularly well. So much so that this year, the Irish Research Council was subsumed into it. Just to give you an idea of the size of the operations involved. Science Foundation Ireland, I think, employs around 250, 300 people. It's large. Research Council had about 35 to 50. It's small. So it just kind of makes sense for one to fold into the other. Now, unfortunately, they couldn't have the sort of the big brand hard launch that now Research Ireland wanted, because there was some legal troubles going on with the chief executive designate of Research Ireland. So he wasn't even in the Research Ireland job yet. He was chief of Science Foundation Ireland, and Philip Nolan from Maynooth, a name that should be familiar to you from the COVID response.
Oh yeah,
not too many years ago. Hard to believe we can actually say not too many years ago when it comes to COVID, but there you have it. And there were 5 internal complaints made about him, and there was an internal report from which we got the direct quote that his behaviour was just below bullying. Now, this what happened subsequently, and I want to be very careful and very clear about this. Philip Nolan was let go from his job, and it was assumed that this was related to this report. Now, Philip Nolan subsequently took SFI to court in order to keep his job. He was given an injunction in the High Court in May to stop him from being let go. SFI went to the Court of Appeal to appeal that decision. And just this week, it was decided that the legal action would come to an end. Both parties have said they're happy with the outcome. And Science Foundation Ireland Research Ireland now, read a very carefully worded statement saying, look, he was let go. Philip Nolan was effectively let go, but it had nothing to do with his performance, right? Pretty much exonerating him of any and all issues within the organization. SFI went on record as basically saying, look, this was an amicable split. It had nothing to do with performance or conduct or anything like that. Let's just go our separate ways. Now, I think this is an interesting lesson in change management, because whatever the idea was when Philip Nolan joined the organization, it didn't seem to have worked for either party. Now, change management, as we know, is absolutely huge. You're dealing with different personalities, different mindsets, different organizational structures. And this is what happened here. And I think one just wasn't a fit for the other. And it doesn't mean that any side was at fault. It's just sometimes the way things work. You have doubtless worked on projects where both sides were just not the right fit.
It's such a key part to everything, just that chemistry.
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, let's move on from that and get on to my brand of the year, Apple.
Apple, as
Another
always. What did they do this year to annoy you?
Goodness. Not too much. Not too much. They gave me a new phrase, actually.
Oh.
They gave me a new phrase. I tried it out with somebody. I was having a Christmas coffee with somebody there last week and they loved it. I said, Apple begins with A, and so does adapter. I think anybody who has an Apple will go, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't it? And it's always 30 quid or 200 quid. It's one of the other.
Yeah, but now they're on the USB-C, like just like the rest of us. And do you remember the product announcement when it was announced? The new iPhone features USB-C, and everyone went absolutely bonkers.
Crazy, yeah. Well, that's
not what we want to talk about.
No, they were banging on about their Vision Pro for a long time, which is kind of their VR AR headset, and at 3,500, we were kind of going, but we had said on the show that, you know, at that price, really what they're doing is they're making like what's it called? An MVP, I think it is, minimal viable product. All right. So basically they're going to get a couple of thousand of them into the world, and it'll be developers who will buy them to see, well, what can we do with this? Yeah. And by the looks of it, not a lot, because they abandoned the entire project this year. So that's it, gone. People were saying like the headset is too heavy. And I don't know if you've tried any of those headsets, but every time I do, and it doesn't matter what brand it is, it just always feels too heavy. And there is something about having your eyes covered over that feels very limiting. Does that make sense? Even though, like, you know, what you're seeing in front of you is on the screen is fantastic, but not so sure. And then, of course, the other thing, Mark Zuckerberg kind of messed it all up for them, because he was banging out his own headset for a tenth of the price. It's 350 quid, I think, or something for the Facebook or the Meta headset. So they abandoned that, and thank God they were looking at self-driving cars, and they've abandoned that project as well. I can't think of anything worse than an Apple car, because you know exactly where they will put the fuel pump or the electric connection. Yeah. Where?
Somewhere nobody else does.
On the bottom. With an on-off button on the bottom, underneath the car. Yeah. Drive you nuts. Anyway, listen, speaking of that, EV sales in Ireland also making your list of big stories this year.
EV sales in Ireland have absolutely, for want of a better word, crashed. They have been appalling this year. Now, the government had set an official target by 2030, so this is part of the government climate action plan, that they want 30% of the fleet, 30% of cars out there in Ireland to be electric vehicles, which is about 945,000 cars and trucks and vans, right? All in together. Apparently, this is not achievable, because sales of electric cars overall in Ireland have actually fallen by 25% over, 25% during the year. It's not good. I mean, these latest figures are from CSO. I think they were released in October. So October this year, 1 quarter worse than October last year, at a time when we should be seeing increases in sales. We're actually seeing decreases. And we know the reasons behind that. I mean, we've got a high cost of cars across the board. Try looking for a second-hand car these days. They are not cheap, let alone a second-hand electric vehicle. Not cheap. People just don't have the same kind of cash to go out and buy a car as they used to. They're looking for value for money. We are in a cost of living crisis. So sustainability, unfortunately, is coming under a nice to have as opposed to a basic necessity. So there is that cost of vehicles, cost of living, and also range anxiety, which just people, they can't get rid of it, because if you look at the Midlands and go east, it's not bad. I mean, there's a certain amount of the infrastructure has a long way to go, but it's still there, it's still chugging along. If you look west, you are in trouble. And it doesn't matter how many miles per charge you're getting or kilometers per charge you are getting on that car. When you see that there aren't enough charge points, you're not going to be happy. You're not going to make the investment.
And that's exactly it. The government needs to do more. And I think, I mean, price is one thing, but that's the first, the range anxiety is the range anxiety is a funny thing, right? Because you kind of get into a petrol car and it'll have an indicator and say you've got another 200 kilometres left. You go, grand, yeah, whatever, 200 kilometres. I'll drop into a garage. It'll take me 3 minutes. I'll fill up the car and then off I go.
Yeah.
Can't do that at the moment with an electric vehicle. And I'm kind of wondering to myself, why don't we have, because Elon Musk and Tesla have got these super high powered charging points in the States. All right. I think they have them here as well. But why is there not at least one of those in every garage in Ireland? Like every single garage required by law to have minimum one high-speed electric charging point, so that you know that you can go into that garage, you can stick your car in for 5 minutes and you get 100 kilometres. Boom, off you go.
Yeah, that's.
I think that's what it needs.
And oddly enough, I mean, we seem to be alone in this. I mean, even if you just cross the border, EV sales in Northern Ireland are up 35%.
Boom. And that's
from October to October.
Yeah, there you go. So it's government is not pushing it. And actually, that's kind of strange because we had the Greens in government up until the recent election. I suppose maybe they were the minority partner, so maybe a bit hard to get things through. But I mean, Eamon Ryan was Minister for Transport, wasn't he?
He certainly was, yeah.
Yeah,
and
so
he
it's
did
unfortunate.
A lot of good stuff. You can't do everything.
Yeah. Oh, no, true.
Stuff.
But that's the big thing. And we're about to go into 2025, right? In 10 years' time, and it sounds like kind of a long time, but where were we? Think back to 2015. Does 2015 seem like a long time ago?
Certainly does.
All right, okay.
To me, anyway.
It kind of doesn't, but you can remember what you were doing in 2015.
That's true.
And who you were with and all that kind of stuff. And when you think about it, it's kind of, it was a while ago, but it's not. I wasn't a kid, all right? What I mean is that in 10 years' time, it's not that long when you're talking a giant step like this. You will not be able to purchase a fuel-driven car in Europe. Fossil fuel car. All of the petrol engines, voomp, gone, banned, 2035, finito.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
In 10 years. It's not that long in 10 years' time. Think about what age you are now and then add 10 years onto it. And it's kind of like, oh, okay. When you hit that age, you will not be able to buy a petrol or diesel car. All right. So what's in place now in order to get us from here to there?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. So why would you buy one? We live in an apartment complex, all right? I would get an electric car, and I'll tell you why I would get an electric car. I don't do too much driving down the country. It's mostly city driving and doing local driving. So grand. I like the thought of my brother-in-law has an electric car, and he charges up at night just while the car is sitting there in the driveway. And then off he goes the next day. He knows he's got 500 kilometers every single day. Sounds like a great deal to me, right? But we live in an apartment, nowhere to charge. There's nowhere to charge. Why would I buy an electric car if there's nowhere to charge?
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of things like that we need to get over. And it's only when government drives these things. Yes. Pardon me, that was unintentional. But it's when government pushes these things through that things happen. And the last government didn't. And do you know what? I have a funny feeling the next government won't either.
Yeah.
That's another soapbox you've got me on. Now, Kitson, would you please stop it? All right, now let's get into...
what have you got?
Another very interesting thing about... Because I'm a tin hatter, conspiracy theorist, and all that kind of stuff, right? And I like kind of looking at something simple that can cause maximum damage. And this year we had a really good example of that, and that was CrowdStrike.
Yeah.
And they supply a lot of the technology to airports. Okay. They did a Microsoft Windows update. Entire system, planet-wide, gone.
Yeah.
Planes couldn't take off. People couldn't make their journeys. The entire air transport system was in chaos because of one Microsoft Windows systems update, which CrowdStrike put through when they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
As we found out afterwards, what they should have done was they should have tested on one or two machines and then rolled it out across the network. But somebody went, no, come on, I'm late for the pints. let's roll it out straight away.
It was a little bit more complicated than that. But
it was a little bit more complicated than that. But
effectively, that's what it was. It was an update. And it threw the entire system out.
Yeah, and it is so easy to do. Look at the chaos that happened. One update. All right. And look at the chaos that happened. And with my tin hat and my conspiracy theory on, just to entertain y'all, we are living in precarious times with certain wars that are all kind of converging in one place. And wars this time will not be fought in trenches or in the air even. It'll be fought online is my reckoning. And countries are going to attack each other by attacking their infrastructure with their electricity, their financial systems, their data, yada, yada, the whole thing. And my question to you, Niall, is in a society where we now live with all of your data online, you do everything through your smartphone, your banking, yada, yada. What if you had no internet tomorrow?
Oh, goodness. That's a good question. I mean... just internet. You know, if I was to go back to dumb phone territory where I could just do calls and texts, you'd get by.
How would you access your bank?
I'd have to go into a branch.
Where are they, Niall?
Well, I can tell you where mine is because of where I live and it's not fair. But yeah, I know.
But they've been closing branches left, right and centre. There isn't even human beings in half the damn branches these days.
It's true. You go in and it's all kiosks.
Yeah, exactly. So like the money is one thing. The other thing is data. All right. Because all of your data is in the cloud. So for people who are working, all right, let's look at it from a business point of view. Everything's in the cloud. So all of your data and your databases and your customer contact details and the way you do things and it's all in the cloud. What if that, you didn't have it tomorrow? You've no business.
Oh, well, yeah, you would have no business. I would have no business.
Exactly.
As somebody that edits a website, my product would be gone.
Yeah.
All my correspondence with my clients. Yeah, my profession would be pretty much wiped out overnight.
You don't realize it until it's gone.
I would have to become a blacksmith.
Brilliant.
You can see me doing manual labor, can't you?
Yeah, yes. All right. Anyway, on the plus side of electronics and stuff like that during the year, when it comes to e-waste, we've had a pretty good year when we're getting rid of our old tech.
Well, we've had an interesting year. I mean, we had a release come in during the year saying I think it's a quarter of our bins are carrying e-waste. I mean, Ireland got rid of 14 million tons of e-waste in Ireland this year. It's not great. And a quarter of our e-waste, it doesn't get recycled. It ends up in the bin. That's not fantastic either. What I will say is interesting when it comes to e-waste is how we are diverting more of what we previously would have thrown away or left in a whatever to the secondary market. And I think we're getting much more bang for our buck when it comes to keeping devices within the supply chain, within the market, whatever. And I think people are losing their fear of buying secondhand or refurbished or pre-loved, whatever way you want to put it. People are losing that fear because it was never so much like, oh, this model is 2 years old, I want the latest, etc. It's all about, will this thing work for me in a year? Is this thing going to pack in for me in 6 months? And we've seen the likes of, Swappy, etc. They have their fairly stringent testing regime where they will make sure that what you get back is not only in fully working order, and that includes, a very good battery as well. So once you get rid of those fears, why not? Why not? And I think we are on the way this year. I think was pretty good year for refurbished and pre-loved products. So that's one of my stories of the year. It's an incremental change, but it's going to become the norm.
Let's talk about AI, and I can't believe we're this far into the show without mentioning AI. I suppose there's two things. One about schools and AI, which we'll talk about in a second. The other, of course, is the EU. Bless them, they brought in the AI Act. And we do like the EU for protecting, you said it earlier, they protect us as a consumer and government protects us as consumers, but then what is the level of protection really is the question to be asked. Facebook and Spotify, need to say, call the AI Act complex. From what you know of the AI Act, do you think it's complex, or are they just don't want to have to abide by any rules?
Complex means we're going to have to spend money.
We'll have to change the way we do things, and nobody likes change.
Yeah. Move fast and break things.
I think, well, you can't really do that in Europe. And I think we might find out a little bit more about that actually with our interview with Moira coming up in a little bit. But first, AI in schools, really good thing coming out from Adapt.
Yeah, Adapt introduced a course earlier this year to help teachers work with AI in schools, in the classroom, to show how AI can be a tool instead of an adversary. Because we know right now there is a huge problem with plagiarism and AI, particularly at third level, where the quality and structure of your idea is paramount. If you are getting the bases of your argument, or even if you're sourcing your argument using AI, you can be in an awful lot of trouble. And there was a good article in The Guardian this week about some people that had been caught, or one of them fessed up later, but one person was falsely accused of having used AI in their assignment, and they admitted that the work wasn't fantastic, it wasn't their best work, but they did it themselves. But the board that was assembled to, assess the veracity of his claims or lack thereof said, no, there were certain phrases in here that indicated to us that this content was AI generated, that this essay was written by a computer. And they were using phrases like, in contrast to, very common phrases, very common filler phrases if you don't really know what you're writing. But I mean, in looking at some of the evidence that was weighted against this guy, it was basically, your writing style is indicative of a machine rather than a person. I find that pretty problematic, especially when you consider that large language models are improving all the time. And we are seeing in customer relationship management software like the likes of Amazon, like the likes of Salesforce are using, you can say, here's what I want to say in this email, and you can change the tone of it with a click of a button and still be very convincing. Mm-hmm. So I think we are entering an age where, look, AI, in the like it or lump it, sorry, you're going to have to like it. And it's time to start learning how to work with it and use it as a tool.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Pandora's box is open and there's no way that's going back in the box.
Anyway, what have you got?
Anyway, there we go. Listen, I think we're going to wrap it up at that for our look back at 2024. And next week, or sorry, not next week, because it's Christmas, but we will be back first week in January with Jason Walsh is going to join us, and the three of us are going to have a look into our crystal ball about 2025. But we look forward to that. But for now, Niall, thanks for joining us on a wander back through 2024.
From TechCentral.ie, this is the award-nominated Tech Radio from TechCentral.ie.
We've talked on the show about the AI Act, the NIS2 Directive, and the Digital Operation Resilience Act, or DORA. And from our conversations, it sounds like businesses are undergoing an unprecedented level of scrutiny. But having a uniform approach to risk can save time, resources, and even improve how different departments talk with management. Moira Cronin is Digital Risk Partner at PwC, and she had a chat with Niall Kitson about the value of consistency.
Moira, when we look at what's been happening at EU level and seeing what's filtering down to, I suppose, domestic level, we're seeing an awful lot of regulations and acts that seem very intimidating. But let's break it down first into the difference between a regulation and an act and what we should be more concerned about.
Thanks, Niall, and thanks for having me on. So when I look at all of the digital regulation that's coming through, we see that some of them are, acts like the Digital Operational Resilience Act, the Cyber Resilience Act, and then we have things like the NIS2 Directive. So the only thing really that's different there between an act and a directive, Niall, is that a directive actually has to be transposed into member state law. So it needs to be transposed into Irish law before it actually becomes law in this country, whereas an act actually just applies to each member state because it's directed from the EU.
That's a very, very simple idea. Just, when we come to the likes of the Digital Services Act, the AI Act, NIS2, the DORA as well, there's an awful lot of acronyms, an awful lot of I suppose, interference, for want of a better word, from the EU coming to Ireland. However, it is possible that we don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to regulations, particularly given the experience of GDPR, where we came up with an approach and kind of implemented it. But are there any lessons from GDPR that can be transposed to what we have at the moment?
Yeah, and I think for a lot of organizations, there's regulatory burnout. You have organizations that are really struggling with the level of regulation that's coming at them. Generally, when I'm talking to clients about regulation, what I'm saying to them is, they really need to step back from it and actually understand what the regulation is trying to do. Now, we're all pulling in the same direction here. We all want a safer Europe. We all want a good market that we can trade in, etc. Right? So, really, what the regulator is encouraging organisations to do is just to put the proper safeguards in place so that they can continue to grow their businesses and in a safe manner. So, what I'm seeing with a lot of these regulations is actually what they're trying to do is really build a safer environment. So when you look at that, regulation is for a broad range of organizations. So if I take DORA, for example, it's everything from the largest financial institutions right down to pension funds. So what I'm saying to the organizations that I work with is you have to take a point of view and you have to take a risk-based approach to these. It's not just a one-size-fits-all. And actually, by standing back from this and really looking at the risk to your own organization, it enables you to implement this in a very efficient and effective manner. Because the last thing you want to do here is just put something in for the sake of putting it in. You absolutely have to take a risk-based approach and have a point of view on what is best for your organization.
Yeah, because looking at a risk-based approach and sort of having that overarching perspective is certainly one way to approach regulation. However, have you seen organizations look at one thing and go, okay, let's get a team to do this, or, oh, we have to reinvent the wheel in order to deal with this problem here? Do you find that, organizations haven't quite embraced the overall risk perspective and are still treating it as individual products or projects?
Yeah, very much so, Niall. And really what I find is that organizations, deal with one specific problem at a time, when actually if you look across all these pieces of regulation, they all have a really strong trend, and there's some very similar. There's a lot of similarities between them that companies should be able to leverage. So by almost treating it in a siloed approach, you're actually missing a lot of the points, that you could get efficiencies from had you looked at this with a different lens. So I think it's very key that organizations, as I say, stand back from this and actually see what do we have in place already, and leverage that before diving into something brand new.
I suppose when looking at things at that boardroom level as well, it's a much easier message to get across just the concept of risk, as opposed to having to dive in and going, guys saying, well, I actually have to consult the IT department. That sounds really complicated. Do you find that level of communication from upper management down to what I'll call the shop floor, for want of a better term, has improved, or has it disimproved?
I think in some ways it's definitely on the path to improvement. I won't say we're there yet, right? There's always room for improvement. I definitely see with a lot of the pieces of regulation that are coming through now, there is responsibilities at a board level, right? And that is really definitely getting a lot more airtime in the boardroom. And boards are far more educated, and they're demanding more and very detailed information, right? So really, I think the tone at the top is really, really important to ensure that it's, that regulation is treated with the utmost of importance, as it should be. But I do think that there is a way to go with organizations to really embed this culturally, particularly when you talk about things like resilience. You really want to embed that in the organization, and you really want to embed that risk-based view across the organization, rather than it being this is just a piece of compliance and we need to comply with it. Because to your point, it is a far easier sell when you can actually show the value to the organization. And that's what I see, the best kids in the class, for the want of a better word, really doing with these pieces of regulations. They're taking them and they're saying, right, how can we apply this to our organization with a risk-based view? And how can we therefore add value to our organization in doing so, rather than just pouring a huge amount of resources and cost into one piece of regulation?
That element of resource management is really fascinating, because whenever we look at a new technology, we're seeing with AI at the moment, the main concern is always that, there's a lack of talent, but also there's a lack of budget. When it comes to organizations assessing what kind of budget they need, does a risk-based approach sort of lend a sort of a comforter to things, where organizations can go, actually, do you know what? Yes, we have XYZ that we have to be in compliance with, but if we come up with a consistent approach, well, that will reduce the amount of budget that we need to allocate to these projects.
Yeah, Niall, I think it's very much about putting your resources and putting your costs in the right place, right? And you have to look at the level of regulation that's coming down the tracks. You have to look at what is most important to your organization. And I suppose, how does it feed into the strategic objectives of the business, right? And that's what we're seeing now, that some of the I suppose the changes that are coming with DORA and with the EU AI Act are actually changing the strategic direction of business. Like, for example, if you look at third-party risk management, which is a huge part of DORA, and indeed NIS2, it really is asking you to look at how you monitor those third parties. And the regulator's view on this is that he should be looking at those third parties as if, and managing those systems as if they were in-house. And sometimes that actually might change the strategy of the company in relation to using that system at a third party. And it might be more cost beneficial, for example, to bring it in-house. Now, that's not the only reason that people outsource. They outsource for expertise, etc. But the most important thing here is that people actually look at the reason that they're doing something and very much address the risk to the organization, as opposed to just complying with something for the sake of complying with it.
It creates a whole other tier of oversight when it comes to supply chains and choosing the companies you want to deal with. Has that message filtered through that, look, you might think you're getting a great deal by using supplier X, but we've had a look, or go in and have a look at their systems and their processes, and that might change your perspective completely?
Yeah, I think that when you look at how important supply chain and that ecosystem has become, that's really coming through very strongly in regulation. And I think if you look at some of the major incidents that we've seen in the last couple of years, a lot of them have been at third-party providers, as opposed to in financial institutions or in the core institution itself. And that has really shone a light on the fact that we need to look at these third parties and we need to bring them into the scope of these regulations, which they are now addressing. And really what I'm finding from a third party perspective is the level of oversight and monitoring, while it has been there in many pieces of guidance that have come down from the different European organizations, it hasn't really been addressed fully. And I think that's really what's coming to the fore. And when you look at DORA, when you look at NIS2, they really want you to go beyond your third party. They don't just want you to stick with the one third party, because they can see the risks that are coming through further down the chain. And that absolutely needs to be addressed and part of what organizations look at.
Let's have a look at the AI Act, something that came in with a great deal of relief, I think, across the EU, that some kind of agreement was reached across all the member states. It'll be a while before we see it fully transposed into law here, but what was your first reaction to seeing the AI Act? Was it a case of, yes, we're on the right path here, or was it look, so much more needed to be done here? There shouldn't have been an exception made for the security services, for example. Do you think companies will look at it and go, yeah, this is fine? Or again, will there be that sense of intimidation?
I definitely think when you look at the EU AI Act, and I'll deal with it in two different views on it, right? So in one respect, what it does is it protects the consumer, right? And it's very, very clear on that. And when you look at what it does, it protects the most important person here, right? So what I think it will enable organizations to do is actually to put a framework in place that protects their employees and allows them to innovate, allows them to use AI, knowing that those guardrails are in place. But as I said, it's just about protecting the consumer. And definitely any of the clients that we're speaking to, we're going beyond the EU AI Act. We're going into a responsible AI framework, which is actually broader than the EU AI Act itself. And it aims to not just protect the consumer, but it aims to protect your wider business, right? And that's really, really critical, because while some breaches of, while some AI systems, for example, will be in breach of the EU AI Act, and will, damage the customer. I think if you look at the wider business perspective, and I'll give you an example now, which is probably the easiest thing to do, right? If you have an AI bot that's rating small or medium enterprises, right, that it's in the business of doing that, and the AI inputs some sort of bias or does something that's inappropriate, that won't breach the EU AI Act, but it will damage your business, right? So what organizations have to be very mindful of here, and this part kind of comes back to my point of making the regulation really relevant to the risk to your organization. You have to every regulation has a lens, it has a focus, and you have to understand what that is. But at the end of the day, what your responsibility is actually to protect your organization. So you may not just need to comply with an act, you may actually need to look at a broader framework to protect the risk to your business.
Moira, we talked a little bit there about third parties and how companies can sometimes be at the mercy of other entities that they're dealing with, and the importance of making sure of people's bona fides. When it comes to what the Digital Services Act is trying to deal with, in particular in protecting the consumer, it's a very different relationship between the service provider and a third party, where you might have a troll farm operating on Facebook, you might have a web store operating in bad faith. How are you seeing big tech respond to this kind of regulation?
So I think now, like, the main goal of that Digital Services Act is really to prevent illegal, harmful activities, disinformation online. And really it's about the consumer. It's about protecting the fundamental rights of consumers and actually creating a fair and open online platform environment, right? Where we can all operate. A little bit like the EU AI Act, it's tiered in that it deals with the most high risk. So it has the most obligations on those with higher risk. So your very large online platforms, etc. And they have been designated by the Commission as very large online platforms, and that comes down to when they actually hit a threshold of users on their platform. So it's 45 million users on your threshold. Once you hit that, and that is self-reported, you then become what they call designated by the Commission. You then have essentially 15 months to get the requirements and the obligations of the Digital Services Act actually implemented. And then 15 months post that designation, you have to be subject to an independent audit. So it is, the bar is quite high. There's quite a number of obligations within the Digital Services Act. So we definitely are seeing the tech firms getting on board with this, because, for a lot of these guys, this is about protecting their consumers, which is absolutely core to their business, and therefore it's competitive advantage on their side.
So looking forward to 2025 then, what kind of regulations are going to be occupying the same sort of mind share as the likes of DORA and NIS2 did this year? So
I think actually as we go into 2025, now a lot of companies are still going to be implementing a lot of what came through in 24. So if I look at DORA, for example, the go live date is the 17th of January, not just one and done. There's an awful lot of ongoing business as usual activity that will need to be done as to show compliance with DORA. I also think there's an awful lot of firms that are not quite there yet with DORA compliance, and it will take them a lot of 25 to really implement it and get it into that business as usual model. If I look at NIS2, as I said, has not been transposed into Irish law. The next date for that is the 17th of April, 2025. And then obviously, you have a lot of companies at the moment that are preparing for that, right? They're getting out ahead of it. I definitely think the Critical Entities Resilience Act is another one that we are seeing, while it has been brought into Irish law, the first organisations won't be actually designated till 26. So there's a lot of companies, again, that will be getting out ahead of that. And then when you look at the EU AI Act, the first milestone in that really is going to be February, which is the 6 months after it was transposed into Irish law as such. And that will be the use of unacceptable systems. So that will have to be dealt with before February. And then 6 months after that, again, you have the high risk systems. So there's an awful lot of activity in this space across the next 12 months, notwithstanding now that there's more in the pipeline and there's more coming in. A lot of organizations are feeling that regulatory burnout. And I think our message to a lot of these guys is, to really look at what they're doing strategically and ensure that they're aligning this to what their business is doing, and that it's, that it's fit for purpose, as opposed to just blindly complying with a piece of regulation.
And that was Moira Cronin, Digital Risk Partner at PwC, chatting with Niall Kitson.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's it for our show this week. Niall, that's it, I think, for 2024. So all I have to say is a Merry Christmas to you and yours. And thank you for everything you've done during the year.
And a Merry Christmas to you and yours also, Dusty.
We're back again on the 3rd of January with a brand new show online and with RT Radio 1 Extra. In the meantime, do remember to share our podcast with a friend. Tell them to look up Tech Radio Ireland on Apple, Spotify or YouTube. Until then, from myself, Dusty Rhodes, and from Niall Kitson, have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters and more at our website techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland, or listen with RTE Radio 1 Extra. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.